Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. After some technical difficulties yesterday, we are back for the Notre Dame football rundown this week. And boy, we got a loaded show for you guys today. We are talking about, some breakout players. We're going to give a combine preview because obviously that's happening about a couple blocks away from my apartment right now. We're going to be talking about some 2027 quarterbacks to get to know. But Brian, before we get there, kind of the tale as old as time with Notre Dame and us being Notre Dame fans as well as covering the team. There's kind of just this ongoing battle that we always just kind of every couple of cycles we just got to refresh and debunk as to why Notre Dame is not in the conference. And so first part of today's show is going to be somewhat of a history lesson for those who still are willing to die on the hill that Notre Dame should be in a conference. And Brian, I'm looking forward to this conversation, man, because it's starting to get real interesting.
I am. We'll talk about our breakout players for offense. We're going to do preview the combine, like Trev said. We're going to talk about some 2027 quarterback stuff. But this originally wasn't going to be on the topic today, the list of topics today. And it's not listed on the rundown, the title. But reason we're adding it is, so at 2 o'clock, I was on Crane and Company today at 11 a.m. And they're doing this new debate thing, this debate show. And they asked me if I wanted to be on with a guy from Miami, a guy named Alex Dono. And I said, look, if this is going to be like a real professional debate, then I'd love to. And they're like, oh, yeah, we're not trying to do all this craziness. And they were correct. It was a good back and forth debate. There wasn't we weren't interrupting each other. It's like, you make your point, I make mine. It was a really nice debate. I enjoyed being on with Alex and I appreciated it. And Alex is a friend of Brian Smith, who's obviously a longtime friend of mine. The first part of it was the Notre Dame needs to join a conference. And of course we get the typical, they have to join a conference. It's not fair. They play a cupcake schedule and then not being being in a conference somehow changes that. And the MOU and the best part about the memorandum of understanding is I think it was might've been Blaine Crane or said this, or might've been David Cohn, but they were like, it's hilarious that people are upset that Notre Dame is guaranteed a spot in the top 12 playoff as long as they are ranked in the top 12. Like the audacity of, you know what I mean? Like that's what they're upset about. But it's just, and then it's the same thing. You take shots at USC fans and all they have is like, join a conference. It's so freaking lame. And it's like, well, I heard my favorite podcaster said it, and I don't really actually have a reason why, but I'm going to say it because it makes me sound like, I'm smart because I'm repeating what every other moron on Twitter said, and it's so frustrating. I'm not taking a shot at Alex here. I mean, I understand where he's coming from. I'm more taking a shot at just the stupidity you see on X and from other fan bases. And the whole thing is just so annoying, Trev. And it is hilarious that nobody has yet to give me a reason why Notre Dame has to join a conference. Not one that makes any sense whatsoever. You have to join a conference in order to get a tough schedule. Okay. That might have meant something 5 years ago. If you were in the SEC West 5 years ago, you were going to have a tough schedule. Didn't care who you played out of conference. You were going to have a tough schedule. That's not the case now. Look at the team that just won the national championship. Indiana, they're in the Big Ten. Look at their schedule. Look at their schedule this year. Here's their schedule. North Texas, Howard, Western Kentucky, Northwestern, at Rutgers, at Nebraska, home against Ohio State, at Michigan, home against Minnesota, home against USC, at Washington, home against Purdue. That's a gauntlet of a schedule. Texas Tech, this is their schedule. Abilene Christian, Oregon State, Houston, Sam Houston State, Colorado, Arizona State, Cincinnati, Arizona, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Baylor, TCU. This is Oregon's schedule, Trev. Boise State, at Oklahoma State, Portland State, at USC, home against UCLA, home against Nebraska, at Illinois, home against Northwestern, at Ohio State. That's a tough one. Home against Michigan, at Michigan State, home against Washington. Notre Dame has to join a conference so they can have that schedule. Explain to me why that's the case. I'm looking at Oregon's schedule, and they played two teams that have been in the playoffs the last 2 years, Boise State and Ohio State. Okay. Cool. Texas Tech is playing 0 teams that have been in the playoffs the last 2 years. No, I'm sorry, 1, Arizona State 2 years ago. Indiana plays 1 team that's been in the playoffs the last 2 years. Notre Dame plays 2. So it's such a lazy debate, and it's just so easy to disprove. Oh, well, what about Ohio State's schedule? What about Ohio State's schedule? That's a hard schedule. But being in the Big Ten doesn't guarantee you that schedule. You know what I mean? And I was like, well, look, Notre Dame in 2 years, Trev, is going to play Texas, Arkansas. Actually, let's pull up the Notre Dame 2028 schedule, because you and I were just talking about it. But you want to talk about like gauntlet of schedules? Like let's look at what Notre Dame gets to play in a couple years. So yeah, unfortunately, this year's schedule isn't as tough because Michigan State's down, Stanford is down, right? I mean, Syracuse is down. They're not the 10-win team they were 2 years ago. Wisconsin is down. When Notre Dame scheduled Wisconsin, they were a much better football team. But in 2 years, Notre Dame plays Texas, Arkansas, at Auburn, at Virginia Tech, home against Clemson, home against Miami, and at Pitt. That's a soft schedule. In 2029, Notre Dame plays Alabama, at Texas, at NC State, at Florida State, at Clemson that season. So this notion that, well, you get to pick and choose who you play. So do you. Any team in a conference gets to pick and choose who they play. 2 ways. 1, you get to pick your non-conference schedule. So Indiana gets to pick North Texas, Howard, and Western Kentucky. I would like to point out to you, when you look at Oregon's schedule, when you look at Texas's Tech schedule, Notre Dame plays more FBS teams than both of those teams. They play more FBS opponents than Penn State. So this notion that by joining a conference, don't even get me started on Penn State's schedule, but this notion that joining a conference means they get to play a tougher schedule, based on what? You have no evidence of that. And you can cherry pick a couple tough schedules and okay, cool. And then I can cherry pick some terrible schedules that are definitely worse than the one that Notre Dame plays this year. So the whole thing is just stupid, right? And we're seeing it. Somebody in the chat, now do Ohio State schedule. That's the point. Like, you're not smart enough to realize you're making my point for me. There's an utter ridiculous imbalance in scheduling now in college football because the Big Ten has 18 teams. You can't create a balanced schedule for 18 teams in a league. You can't create a balanced schedule in the SEC when there's 16 teams in the league. When there was 8 to 10, you could do that. When the ACC had 8 to 9 teams, you could do that. When the Big Ten had 10 teams, you could do that because you had to play every team in the Big Ten. You could evaluate their schedule and say it's pretty much the same as everybody else. But now you can't do that because, as I said, you can cherry pick Ohio State and I can cherry pick Indiana and Penn State. And guess what they all have in common, Trevor? They're all in the Big Ten. So how does joining a conference benefit Notre Dame? Because somehow magically, wave a magic wand, whoof, tough schedule. 1 year, and then the next year it's garbage, which is exactly what Indiana and Penn State have this year.
It's just such a tired argument. It is. I mean, look, what people still pay attention to are the names on the jerseys and where they play because of college football lore. Hey, SEC fans, I hate to break it to you. And some people may disagree with this still. Playing in the swamp doesn't mean jack to me. They haven't had a double-digit win season since 2019. Hey, Big Ten fans, I don't care if you play on the road against Nebraska because one time that 1 year they sold out a 90,000-seat stadium to their volleyball team. I don't care. Nebraska hasn't beaten a ranked opponent in a decade. Conference affiliate, that's such a weird thing to me, is loving your conference. If you're a Green Bay Packers fan, like I know our guy Clayton is, do you hope that the Bears go on to win the Super Bowl because you're both in the NFC North? That stuff is weird to me. I don't understand that line of thinking. I don't. And I think college football might be one of the only sports that think that way. I think it's odd. I really do. But we have to get out of this just looking at the names on the jerseys. Because when you whittle it down to its bare bones and you evaluate them for a football team, you start to realize, like I've seen so much about how, Notre Dame added BYU. Who cares? BYU is not good. It's like, well, that's because you don't perceive them to be good. They're on the brink of making the playoffs. They lost smart. 2 games.
Right.
They lost 2 games in 2025 to one team. A team that was in the college football playoff quarterfinals and received a bye. We got to get out of this thing. Well, you didn't go schedule Bama. And it's like, okay, neither did you. Like, what are we talking about here?
BYU's not as good as USC, Trev. BYU's been ranked more in the last 6 years than USC. And oh, by the way, they played each other in like 2022. Do you remember who won that game, Trev? Yeah, BYU. BYU did. Not a bowl game. It was a regular season game. BYU won. But they're BYU and they're USC, and people look at the helmet. Because the reality is there's a lot of college football fans who don't know anything beyond what they're told to know. Or they're not in this league. Okay. Sure. There are some Big Ten schedules this year that are very hard. We've talked about Ohio State as a very hard schedule, which is not a Notre Dame problem. Like, what does Notre Dame have to do with that? Why aren't they pissed at Indy? Why do we have to play this schedule in Indiana and Penn State and have to play that schedule? How's that fair? Well, you brought that on yourself. I also want to do a little history lesson for people. This is the question that I asked. They said, Brian, Notre Dame should join a conference. And my first response, and I paused and said, why? By the way, that debate is going to come out at 2:00, and they pick the winner by – you guys pick the winner. Most responses. So what I'll ask all of you in the chat today is, when that comes out on Twitter, go on there, vote, say, go Irish, say, Brian won. Be respectful, because Alex was respectful to me. The debate was respectful. I enjoyed the debate. The topic pisses me off. I don't have an issue with Alex. What I thought was kind of wild, though, is I'm debating about Notre Dame's soft schedule with someone from Miami. And I just want to point out to everybody on like planet Earth that actually looks at Miami's schedule is, how is Miami's schedule tougher than Notre Dame's? Can somebody explain that to me? If you look at Miami's schedule this year, their toughest opponent is Notre Dame. They play one team that won more than 9 games last year. Trev, that's Notre Dame. They play only 3 teams that won more than 9 games last year. Notre Dame plays 3 teams that won 10 or more games last year. 3. And they actually all won more than 10 games. They played teams that won 13, 12, and 11. And if Miami keeps telling us that, we're better than Notre Dame, well, all right, cool. So Notre Dame's toughest game is harder than your toughest game. Is that what you're admitting? The second best team on Miami's schedule this year, basically looked at last year, is Duke at 9-5. The third best team on Miami's schedule for this year, based on last year's schedule, Wake Forest. Their next best opponent, Pitt. Their next best opponent, Clemson. Their next best opponent, Central Michigan. And I'm supposed to believe that that's a tougher schedule than one that Notre Dame, where SMU, who beat Miami last year, it has the 4th best record on Notre Dame's schedule for next year. I'm supposed to somehow say oh no, oh yeah, that's a way tougher schedule. That's the hilarious thing, is I have somebody from Miami telling me that Notre Dame plays a cupcake schedule. Your second best opponent is Duke, whose quarterback you just stole, whose best wide receiver you just stole. So the whole thing is lazy, but let's do a little history lesson. Why is Notre Dame one of only 2 remaining independents, Trevor? Before you were born, there were over 20, almost 30 independent programs. In 1988, when Notre Dame won the national title, there was over 20. I think there was 24 or 25 independent teams. Why did they stop being independent? Was there a rule passed? Was there a college rule passed that said no, every team has to join a conference except Notre Dame? We're going to give you an exception. No. Let's do a little history lesson, okay? There's an organization that formed in 1977 called the College Football Association, who basically signed their own TV deal in 1981. And basically all the conferences, there was 62 teams, all the conferences, Notre Dame, Penn State, some other independents, all joined the CFA. And so they determined who was going to be on TV. There was between 60, 80 games on TV on a weekly basis. They chose, if you were the SEC, You couldn't sign your own deal. You had to sign with the CFA, and then they would get you on TV. 1984, the NCAA starts threatening teams that are part of the CFA, saying, hey, we want to determine who's going to be on TV. We're going to come after you and penalize you if you go outside of what we want. Typical NCAA stupidity. So in 1984, actually in 1981, Georgia and Oklahoma, the border regions for Oklahoma, and then Georgia enjoined the lawsuit, sued the NCAA. And in 1984, the ruling was handed down and they won. So the NCAA, as of 1984, could no longer determine who gets to be on TV. The CFA did. The College Football Association then determined it. And you started to see, more games on TV. 1991, Notre Dame leaves the CFA to sign their own deal with NBC. Around that same time, you started to see other leagues, other independent teams start joining other leagues. Penn State leaves in 1991. They got rejected by the Big East, which was done by the Big East, and so they went to the Big Ten. Miami went to the Big East. Florida State went to the ACC, and slowly but surely teams left. Louisville originally went to Conference USA because they couldn't even get into a bigger league, and they eventually worked their way up to the Big East. And so those teams chose to join a conference. Why did they choose to join a conference? Because they couldn't get the same deal that Notre Dame did. Why? Because their brand power wasn't good enough. They needed to join a conference. There was no rule. This was all about TV money. All about TV money. Then the game completely changes in 1995 when the CFA is still in control, but Notre Dame and some other things have happened. 1995, the SEC and the Big East signed an exclusive deal with CBS because at the time, ABC carried all those rights. They signed in 1995. CBS signs the SEC. Within 2 years, the CFA was dead. And then leagues started signing their own deals. The reason all these teams left, also in 1991, Arkansas went to the SEC, and it all happened because of the TV revenue that was starting to directly flow into the leagues. So no longer everybody was kind of making a similar amount of money and a small number of teams were on TV. So teams started joining leagues to protect their non-football sports, to put their football programs in good positions so that they could then take advantage of the revenue. I could find you articles from the 90s about how Miami got this windfall of money coming into their program because they were now in the Big East. It was all about money. It was all about TV money, which I'm fine with. That's why Notre Dame signed with NBC. That's the direction it was going. There was no rule that was passed that said you have to join a conference. None. Those teams joined conferences because that was their path to getting a deal. Now, here we get fast forward to recently. Notre Dame signs a memorandum of understanding that if they finish in the top 12, they get in the playoff. That's not fair. Notre Dame has a special deal. You know who else has a special deal, Trevor? Every single Power 4 team in college football. Every single one. Because it says this: if you win your conference, no matter where you're ranked, you're in. People forget this. People don't want to talk about this. The new MOU, the new rules that include Notre Dame is in the so if Notre Dame finishes in the top 12 of a 12-team playoff, they're in. The horror of that. But if Duke wins the ACC in 2026 with an 8-5 record, they're in the playoffs. If the SEC champ ranks 13th or 15th or 18th, they're in the playoffs. If the Big 12 champ ranks 18th, they're in the playoffs. Because that's the new rule that goes into effect starting this year. So Notre Dame got left out last year because the MOU wasn't in effect. It didn't help Duke last year because it wasn't in effect. It goes into effect now. Notre Dame has the benefit. Now every other team does as well. Well, we have to win our conference. Yeah, Notre Dame has to be ranked in the top 12. And we just saw that the committee has no problem arbitrarily dropping Notre Dame in the rankings to fit their agendas. So Notre Dame really needs to be in the top 10. Because if they're 11th or 12th, they can just drop them. Just drop them to 13. Well, what if they don't play? You mean like like this year when Notre Dame didn't play and Miami didn't play, and they just decided to jump Miami over Notre Dame for no reason whatsoever. So they really got to be in the top 10. Every team, every Power 4 team has a deal in the MOU that if they win their league, they're in no matter where they're ranked. Well, why is Notre Dame different? Because Notre Dame's not in a league. And every other team had the right to negotiate their own deals if they chose. They chose not to because they joined a league. If Miami wanted to negotiate their own rights, if Ohio State wanted to negotiate their own rights, if Michigan wanted to negotiate their own rights, they can do that. Just inform your conference that when your grant of rights is up, you're leaving. And you're going to be independent. And you're going to sign your own TV deal. There's no rule saying you can't do that. None. Not one. No rule. So every Power 4 team enters 2026 with a guarantee from the committee that if you do this, you get an automatic bid. Every single one. Well, we're not going to win the SEC. Well, that's your fault for sucking. Notre Dame has to be really good to get in. So this notion that Notre Dame has a exception carved out is just flat out it's either a lie from some people or it's ignorance from others. Because every Power 4 team now has a guarantee to get into the playoffs. They just have to win their league. And for some teams, that's going to be a lot easier than others. That's going to be a lot easier for Penn State and Indiana than it will be for Ohio State. Right? Because Ohio State has a much tougher road. But Ohio State could lose to Texas by 100, and it won't matter. They just win the Big Ten. They could lose to Texas by 100 points, and it's over by halftime, and they have a running clock in the second half, all of that. And they could drop out of the top 25 and never get back in because they could say, hey, listen, we're not going to have a team that's ranked that lost 100-0 in our top 25. But if Ohio State wins the Big Ten, it doesn't matter. They're in the playoffs. So every team now has that. So that's your comeback to anyone that says, well, why does Notre Dame get special conference? They don't. They're just the only one that has to do it on their own. And who okayed that? Every Power 4 commissioner gave the okay for that. So I'm tired of the ignorance. I wanted to do that little quick history lesson, Trevor, to people understand. The only reason Notre Dame is not in the league is because they sacrificed making more money. And if you really want to go back in it, let's not forget Notre Dame tried to join a conference 3 times and got rejected by the Big Ten 3 times. And that forced them to become the barnstorming national program that they are today. So if Notre Dame had their way, they'd be in the Big Ten. The Big Ten said, no thanks. We don't like Catholics. And so Notre Dame did their own thing. So I just want to remind people of all of this. So you can spew all you want, join a conference and sound just like every other idiot on X. Or you can actually, learn things and realize that Notre Dame doesn't actually have anything unique that everybody else doesn't have. Notre Dame is given a pathway to get in. Every other team in college football has been in the Power 4 has been given a pathway to get in. Notre Dame, you got to rank in the top 10. Ohio State, you got to win the Big Ten or rank in the top 10. You could be ranked 11th or you could be ranked 13th, win the Big Ten and get in the playoffs. If Notre Dame's ranked 13th, they're at home. That's what they sacrifice by not being in a conference. So people just need to get a clue. I just really dislike how ignorant some people are, willfully ignorant of certain things. Like, I just don't want to know, because if I know, then I can't keep saying this dumb, stupid thing that I just can say all the time because I think I'm owning the Irish fans by saying, join a conference, as if we're like, no, you said our kryptonite. We can no longer debate anymore because you said join a conference. Well, we did join your conference for 1 year, and we made the title game. We've been in your conference for 1 year, Miami, and we've made as many ACC title games as you have, having been in the league for over a decade. Almost 20 years now. You know what I mean? So y'all can miss me. Y'all can miss me with that. Just learn things. It's not hard. It's not going to, I promise you, Trev, for you fans out there, non-Notre Dame fans or anybody, your brain won't explode by actually doing real research and learning things. Like scientifically, it's been proven that if you actually read things and learn things and become knowledgeable, your brain won't in fact explode, and you might actually have a better, overall quality of life by not being ignorant anymore. Scientific studies on that, Trev.
It's a heck of a concept. Might have to try that. Maybe. The uprising from the MOU is hilarious. And the only reason why people are upset about it is because Notre Dame is individually listed. Why? Because they were one of two. I mean, I guess if they wanted to, UConn, I suppose, could try to make a fight to if they rank somewhere in the top 12, I suppose. But it goes back to every scenario that you laid out. The funniest thing that I think about is, back to CBS Sports put out a college football playoff projection. They put Notre Dame second, and their rationale for putting them at second was because of the MOU. The MOU doesn't say if Notre Dame is ranked, then they have to get a bye. That's not what it says. You elected to put that in there. People are up in arms because outlets like FanDuel have Notre Dame as the number one odds to win the national championship this year. I hate to break it to you. That's because they're a good football team and they bring a lot back. It's not because of the MOU. If you have the MOU, you don't just get handed the trophy. Very few teams just get handed a playoff spot. And one of them we saw last year, and it was in a part of a conference. So it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You and I were talking on the phone before this, and people get so upset about this. Here's the benefit of playing in a 12-team playoff. You have to earn your way to get to the national title game. Let's just grant the premise and say that we thought, which we don't, but we just thought Notre Dame was playing a softer schedule than what Elkhart High School football is going to play this fall in Elkhart, Indiana. Let's just grant that premise. But then they get to the playoffs, and then they have to play Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, and then Oregon to win a national championship. You have to go earn it on the field. It doesn't matter. Even in the 14 playoff, Michigan played one of the most woeful schedules I've ever seen. They didn't play a ranked opponent until November in the regular season, and they won a national championship, went undefeated. Why? Because, they cheated, and they earned it in the playoffs. They didn't cheat in the playoffs, but they earned it on the field. Indiana this past season started out their season against Old Dominion and Indiana State and the Indianapolis Fire Department, and they made the national championship game, and nobody batted an eye because they played in the Big Ten. We just got to get out of this looking at the logos and looking at all this and then assuming that this is going to be a hard game because, I know that name.
Yep.
We just got to get out of that. It's getting ridiculous, man.
Yep.
It really is.
Yep, it is. It's very frustrating. Very frustrating. And it's lazy. That's the biggest thing about it. It's lazy. And I wish people from Notre Dame would make this case more often. Like, I really wish we just value our independence. Why? Explain why. Because here's the reality for all the people. Notre Dame's greedy. Notre Dame could make more TV money if they join the Big Ten. No question about it. They can make more TV money if they join the SEC. No question about it. They're smart enough to understand that it's not TV. Unlike a lot of teams, TV money isn't the main driver of this for Notre Dame. That's part of it. But it's just so frustrating. And I love your point, Trev, because back in the day when it was a two-team, basically BCS game, sure, it could matter who you played. But I remember BYU being undefeated one year and for a long time, and they weren't even ranked in the top 10 because they were playing Coastal Carolina and, basically a G5 schedule, right? I mean, you're playing 10 Power 4 teams next year. Yeah, but they're not good teams. All right, cool. Being in a conference doesn't guarantee that I'm going to play 10 good teams. Indiana's a great example. Michigan 23, great example. So the whole thing is just freaking frustrating. And I'm just sick and tired of just the lazy arguments that people make. And somebody said, why does this matter? Who cares what people on X say? Because it's the same crap regurgitated on ESPN, the same crap that gets regurgitated by people at CBS Sports. It's the same crap you see people get regurgitated on 3 and Fox Sports and everything else. So it's like, that's why it matters. And you say, well, why are we talking about this? Because it's a college football topic, and this is a freaking college football show. Do you want us to address the State of the Union? Would that be more relevant to you? Would that matter more to you? This is a college football show. We're talking about a college football topic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because all those people have to hear it from somewhere, bro. They always have to hear it from somewhere. And yeah, sure, you'll get some people that they hear it from, their great uncle who had a neighbor who's, had a cousin that went to Michigan and hates Notre Dame. Sure. But then you also have people that hear it from legitimate talking heads around the country in college football.
Yeah.
People who people tune into regularly to hear that stuff from. That's why it matters. I'm with you,
yes.
man. But
and it matters because exactly. And it matters because it bleeds into things that are done in boardrooms. That's why it matters. Mm-hmm. Because you're seeing people start to say, well, we're going to do this to Notre Dame. We're going to do that to Notre Dame. And so, yeah, it freaking matters. It absolutely matters. We saw Notre Dame drop last year. Do you think they're dropped if they're a Big Ten team? Nope. They could have had if they were in the Big Ten last year, they probably would have had an easier schedule. Because if Notre Dame was a Big Ten team, you know who they wouldn't have played last year? Both Miami and Texas A&M.
Facts.
What's Notre Dame's record last year if they have Indiana's schedule? At worst, 11-1. And guess what 11-1 gets you? A home playoff game. So,
if not a bye, if they went to the conference championship and won,
right?
Potentially,
right. I'm saying like 11-1 and they don't even get in. I'm just like at worst 11-1 and they're hosting a home playoff game. At worst,
100%.
Yeah. So the whole thing is because your point is spot on, Trevin, and we'll wrap it up with this. If you're not good enough, you're going to get exposed in the playoffs, like Alabama did.
I was just about to say,
like Texas Tech did. You know what I mean? Like if you're not good enough, you're going to get exposed. Notre Dame got in for their, you lost to Northern Illinois. All right, cool, but they beat Georgia, they beat Indiana, they beat Penn State. So the whole Northern Illinois loss, your schedule is soft, didn't matter. Indiana doesn't deserve the number 1 seed. They didn't play anybody. All right, cool. Well, that stopped mattering the minute they went out and beat Alabama by 35, beat Oregon by 34, and beat Miami to win the title. That stopped mattering. This team got beat and that team would have beat Indiana. Okay, but that team got beat by a team that Indiana beat or got beat by a team that got beat by a team that Indiana beat. So the whole thing is just, it's silly. If they're not good enough, they're going to get bumped out. Well, that's unfair. To who? The number 12 team? Or the number 14 team who should have got in? Like, who's getting bumped out for Notre Dame? The 4th or 5th best Big Ten or SEC team? Well, if Notre Dame joined your conference, they're getting bumped out anyway by Notre Dame. Like, the whole thing is stupid. Like, this hurts you if Notre Dame joins your league, right? You don't think Notre Dame's going to be immediately one of the best teams in the Big Ten or the ACC? Come on. Give me a break.
And also, for anybody that forgets how playoffs are structured, if you're the 11th best team in a 12-team playoff, and then at the end of the year, there ends up being 12 teams better than you, you get bumped regardless.
Yes.
Because that's how playoffs work.
Exactly.
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 Come on, man.
Exactly. Like, Michigan played a soft schedule in 2023. Well, guess what? It didn't matter because they went out and beat Alabama and beat Washington. Because if they weren't good, they'd have lost one of those 2 games. Indiana didn't play anybody. Okay, cool. Who cares? Because they went out and destroyed Alabama, destroyed Oregon, and beat Miami. And outplayed Miami, in my opinion, the entire game. It was a good game. Miami battled their tails off that game. But no one's now saying, well, Indiana's schedule's soft. Why is nobody talking about how Indiana's schedule's soft? Well, look what they proved. Yeah, look what Notre Dame proved. They went to the title game. So the whole thing is, why is nobody talking about how soft Miami's schedule is, which is softer than Notre Dame's, by the way? Because, well, Miami proved they're good. Exactly. So did Notre Dame. So I'm frustrated by it because I'm just sick and tired of just the lazy. And then you'll see some Notre Dame fans grab onto this too, and that's when I really get pissed off. When Notre Dame fans don't ever give in to your enemy. Don't ever give in to the arguments people that hate you make. Because guess what? Giving into their arguments won't make them like you. It just means they win and they still hate you. They get their way and they still hate you.
Yeah, they'll find something else. They always do. Always do.
Exactly.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for part 1 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We have much more coming on this Notre Dame football rundown. But before we get there, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know whenever we go live. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends and family. Anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But the best way to stay in tune, spring ball's right around the corner. Believe it or not, March starts on Sunday. And so spring football is going to be around the corner before you know it. Best way to stay in tune and the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com.